I say this in every single video, but I cannot believe August is over. I'm elated that August is over. I'm overjoyed that August is over. Now I can start a lot of books that I've been saving for the fall season. But before talking about my fall books, let me tell you about the last few books I read in summer. I think this is all of them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. The first book I finished in August was The Incredible Journey by Sheila Branford. I actually read the majority of this in July though. It almost feels like a distant memory now. I think I read like maybe 5 pages on August 1st. If you don't know, Sheila Branford was a Scottish writer who spent most of her life living in Canada, and The Incredible Journey takes place in the wilderness of Ontario, Canada. It tells the story of 3 animals who are pets to the Hunter family. We have a Labrador, a bull terrier, and a Siamese cat. The Hunter family is out of town and the animals are left with a family friend, John. He decides to go hunting for a weekend, so he has a babysitter come and watch the pets. But before their new babysitter arrives, the 3 animals decide to take matters into their own hands and head back to their actual home. Thus, they embark on this wild adventure through the Ontarian wilderness. They meet other animals on the way, wild animals. They meet other people, kind and mean. They also lose each other at some points. For some of you, I know this sounds very familiar. It sounds like the plot of Homeward Bound. The movie is based on this book, but there are some obvious differences. Like, I believe in the movie, there was not a bull terrier. Instead, I think he's a pit bull or maybe a bulldog. The names are different in the movie. Also, the personalities of the pets are different. I feel in the movie, the animals were more anthropomorphized. They were given the personalities, the emotions, the thought processes of humans. Whereas in this book, that is also the case, but way less so. I liked reading this. I thought it was very wholesome and endearing. However, I did find it to be very boring. This is a children's chapter book, and I don't label it as such stringently. People can read whatever they want to read. I don't have a problem with reading children's chapter books. I'll read even a picture book. But speaking plainly, because the plot and the writing is meant for children to also be able to read, I found it boring. Also, I've seen Homeward Bound, so I knew it was going to happen. Even if I hadn't seen Homeward Bound, I would have known what was going to happen. This is a children's book, so that took out any suspense in the heightened scenes. So while I don't have any actual specific grievances with this book, I didn't find it very memorable. I picked this one up at a used bookstore and I had no idea that Homeward Bound was based on this book. If I had known, I probably wouldn't have read it. I do think this would be a great story to read to a child, like before bed, or even give to a child to read themselves. I'm glad I read it because at least I have that in my back pocket if the occasion ever arrives. So the next book I actually finished was A Girl Returned by Donatella di Pietrantonio. I then went on to finish Agatha Christie's 5 Little Pigs. After that, I finished A Sister Story by Donatella di Pietrantonio. This is the sequel to A Girl Returned, so I'm just going to review them consecutively. I read both of these with my friend who told me that she was in a reading slump. I asked her if she wanted to read a book with me, buddy read, and we both chose A Girl Returned. By the way, whenever I say that I read a book with a friend, that basically means that we decided on a book together and then read separately. There's no schedule or rush. We check in every now and then to see where the other is at and share any opinions, thoughts. And then when we both finish, we share opinions. Very casual. A Girl Returned is a very short book, so we both finished this in about 1 to 2 days. I also finished this one at the very beginning of the month. It's been a few weeks now. Usually when I think back on a book that I enjoyed, I have fond feelings for it. I feel that I have a lot of thoughts I want to express and share with you guys. With this one, even though ultimately I didn't dislike it, now that some time has passed, I feel very so-so about it. The main character is an unnamed protagonist who grows up very comfortably with relatives who she had always believed to be her actual parents. She gets sent back to live with her biological family, who are vastly different from the family that she's always known. They're living in poverty, and she has 4 other siblings, and her parents are not as warm and comforting as her relatives were. They don't dote on her, they're busy, and they're stressed trying to make ends meet. I'm sure you can imagine the feelings of disruption and confusion that the protagonist feels, especially since she's also grappling with the changes of girl teenhood as well. While she struggles to accept her new family, she does forge a very tender, precious bond with her younger sister, Adriana. I found that relationship to be the best part of this book. The worst part of this book was the odd relationship she had with her older brother. Okay, I understand that they didn't grow up together. When they meet, I believe that he is in his late teens. If I had known that was going to be a plot point, I don't think I would have read this book. It it grossed me out. Thankfully, though, due to circumstance, which I won't reveal, that odd relationship was short-lived. Despite that, I did find this to be very readable. I did enjoy some parts. I found the dual relationships between the biological mother and the foster mother to be very telling and poignant. I liked how the author delved into the complexities of family, especially mother-daughter and sister-sister. The writing style was not my favorite. It was very observant. The best way I can describe that is I noticed you don't spend a lot of time inside the characters. The writing stays outside of them, instead describing what they're saying, what they're doing. I don't want to be annoying and compare her writing style to Elena Ferrante just because they are two Italian women authors who are published in English by Europa Editions and both translated by Anne Goldstein. But the protagonist in A Girl Returned is very similar to Elena and Leela from My Brilliant Friend. We have a young girl born into poverty, destitute circumstances, who has this innate propensity for brilliance and academia. All three of these girls are strongly tethered to the place where they're from, but also desperate to escape that place. For me, that's where the similarities end. Ferrante's writing depicts inner workings, turmoil, even the subconscious really well. I felt that Pietrantonio hovered above those things and instead was more observant about what the five senses could perceive. Do I think her style of writing is not as good as Ferrante's style of writing? No. However, do I prefer Ferrante's style more? Yes, personally. I think I would have cared more about the characters and the story, and maybe I would have felt more involved. I did like this well enough to go ahead and pick up the sequel, A Sister's Story. This I did not enjoy. For me, this felt very unnecessary. It did not add anything to the first story. In fact, I even feel that it tarnished it. If you've read A Girl Returned, I wouldn't recommend this. I would not even recommend this as a standalone book, which you can read because it felt very disjointed from this book. Like, it felt like completely different characters. Even weeks later now, I'm confused why this exists. So the plot revisits the unnamed narrator as well as her little sister Adriana, and they are both all grown up. The story starts to take off when Adriana shows up with a baby and no explanation. Then the plot switches back and forth between the unnamed protagonist and Adriana, between the past and the present, between Italy and France. I was so confused at many points. I do enjoy stories that can weave the past and the present, different narratives, but something about the writing here completely lost me. I wouldn't even know where or what time frame we were in, like 20 pages into a section. So that was pretty jarring and frustrating. And I assumed that this book would further explore that tender personal relationship between the two sisters that had been forged into this resilient, unbreakable bond in A Girl Returned. But the writing here portrayed their relationship as very tepid, unremarkable, bland. It didn't seem that the two sisters liked each other or even knew each other. It also was just very boring until maybe the last quarter of the book, but it didn't get better. It kind of veered into soap opera territory. Yes, I'm sad to say that I was disappointed by this one. It was by no means the worst book I ever read. If I really disliked it, I would have put it down. Of these two, I recommend A Girl Returned. If you end up really loving this story, maybe pick up A Girl's Story, although I don't think it's necessary, and like I said, it may even tarnish your experience of the first book. And beware of the brother. I have finally read an Agatha Christie. This is Five Little Pigs. Previously, I did try to listen to an audiobook by her. It was another mystery with Poirot, and it was a Christmas one. I remember this specifically because I got LASIK right before Christmas, and you know, after you get LASIK, I don't think you're supposed to use your eyes that much, so I had downloaded that as an audiobook to listen to. I wanted something festive and easy. I ended up listening to it for about 15 minutes, like a few hours after my surgery, and never picking it up again. I think mostly because the next day I had perfect vision, no pain, really no downtime besides the day of. I had gotten Smile LASIK, which apparently you recover from really quickly, and I did. Anyways, Five Little Pigs, I read with my friend Emily for our little book club of 2 people. She chose this one, and she actually really enjoys Agatha Christie's books. She has read quite a few, and she refers to them as palate cleansers. I understand that because there is an ease that I slid into while reading this. And you know what? Even though this was a murder mystery, I felt so cozy and wholesome every night getting into my bed and picking this up. This is the type of book that you want to read on a vacation, maybe over a holiday, Christmas. There is an ease to her writing and the plot without it being childish or boring. Also, I suspect that her books have a formula to them. I've only now read one, but it felt very formulaic, and I think that can be comforting, and that could be a reason why people return to her books. As for the story itself, we have a young lady named Lucy, whose mother spent the majority of her life in jail for murdering Lucy's father, her husband. I hope that made sense. Before the mother's death, she sends Lucy a letter saying that she actually had never murdered her husband, Lucy's father. She's been innocent the entire time. Lucy then goes to Poirot and she asks him to help her find her father's actual murderer. We then have a list of 5 suspects who we each meet in turn as Poirot interrogates them. And we also get to hear each suspect's own perspectives of what happened the day of the murder. Like I said, it felt very formulaic to me, but there is something comforting in that. Like, we have the 5 suspects lined up, and Poirot and we went down the line and looked at each one, lining up versions of the event for anything amiss. A straightforward mystery that's comforting, but you're still intrigued. You're clued in because even though the plot is following a formula, you still don't know who the culprit is. I admit that I did not figure it out before the end. I thought I did, but then Christie did a reverse twist on me. She was playing in my face the whole time. Yeah, I enjoyed this for what it is. It didn't try to be anything more than what it is, and I respect that. Now, am I going to read more Agatha Christie books? Probably. I also don't really feel the need to keep her in my frequent repertoire. I think I should save her books for special occasions, maybe holidays, Christmas, or as a palate cleanser. Let me know if you're an Agatha Christie enthusiast, what are some of her must-reads? I don't want any of her well-known ones like Murder on the Nile. I think that's Death on the Nile. I want to know her lesser known gems and one that will have my jaw on the floor. Okay, it is Faulkner time. Light in August took me the longest time to read in August. I finished off the first 4 books pretty quickly at the very beginning of the month, and then this took up the entire middle of the month, all the way up until the end of August. This is my second read by William Faulkner. Previously, I had read Sanctuary because I found a used copy of it. This was a long time ago, by the way. I was like, oh, Faulkner. I've never read him. I ought to. I didn't like it. And one of the reasons why is I really struggled with the Southern colloquialisms and dialect that he literally writes into the prose. I remember really struggling with the dialogue. I had no idea what the characters were saying, what they were talking about. This one, in terms of the dialect and the colloquialisms, I didn't really struggle with as much. I don't think it was as present in this. Anyways, I was not a fan of Sanctuary. After reading it, I was aghast. I was like, this is one of the great American writers. Disturbed, to say the least. I was aware that Sanctuary is very controversial, though. Some people explain it away as a potboiler. Basically, that means that he wrote this ridiculous, contentious story in order to make quick money. This is a popular theory that I don't think has been confirmed by Faulkner himself, so this is debatable. I also know that many people love Sanctuary and find value in it. Me personally, I just did not like it. I did not enjoy the experience reading it. My thing though is for me to confidently be able to say, I don't like Faulkner, I don't like his books, I need to read more of his books first. I can't just read his one infamously controversial book that he's not even known for and then start declaring that I don't like Faulkner. So at the beginning of the year, I did decide to read more of his books. I was going to read The Sound and the Fury, but then I found this lovely vintage copy of Light in August. I really like this green part here. I don't know if that's on purpose because it's only there. Maybe it was stained somehow from the cover, or maybe it was intentional. I like it. Yeah, so that's the long-winded story of why I decided to read Light in August, and what better time to read it than in August. So I want to bring up that William Faulkner is a Southern Gothic writer. He's from Mississippi and he was writing in the early 1900s. Most of his novels take place in Mississippi. Actually, I think they all take place in the same town, like a fictional town, but it's in Mississippi in that same time frame, early 1900s, Jim Crow laws era. He's most definitely a product of his time, and so are many of his primary characters. My thing though is, if he were writing about the South at that time any differently, it would have been inappropriate. It would seem like a cover-up. I don't think it's appropriate to whitewash history or embellish it with lovely platitudes that just simply didn't exist. That being said, Light in August is a brutal read. I also know that Faulkner was beloved by many other authors that I love, such as Ralph Ellison. I do think viewing his stories and his writing through the lens of today can be quite difficult. I still think that it's okay to engage with it and view it as a product of its time while still being able to grasp the takeaway, the value that it has, but still, big forewarning, this was not an easy read. Having read this, do I think Faulkner is a good writer? Yes. At least in here, his writing is unbelievably impressive, awe-inspiring. The way that he can write about a single ray coming through a window or a door frame. That single description can make you feel all kinds of emotion, hope, forlornness. He's one of those writers who writes in a very specific niche way, but still manages to be universally familiar. His writing strikes at your heart, and it is so annoying. Anyways, that was a long introduction. So Light in August is about several characters. It mostly centers a man named Joe Christmas, a terrible, terrible man who also invokes a lot of heartbreak and empathy out of the reader. He reminded me a lot of Kathy from East of Eden. Both of them have this scary, not of this world feel to them. They're also both completely alone. Yes, socially they're outsiders, but as people, they're also very singular beings. They don't relate to others. They cannot connect to others, maybe of their own volition, maybe due to circumstances that they had no say in, maybe due to nature. Were they born to be that way? Was it written into their DNA? That query is actually one of the main themes of this book. My camera died in the middle of my Faulkner talk, so we're gonna try this again. I think in my last recorded clip, I was talking about his writing, or I had just finished talking about his writing. Also, side note, I don't usually feel impressed when writers utilize circular structure. I feel like sometimes it's just an easy, artful way to end a story. Here, I was impressed. That stood out to me. It meant something, and I feel like that's a good example of why I liked his writing. He's old school. There are other prominent characters as well. I would say 3 in total: Lena, Byron, and Hightower. And you'll notice that all 4 characters have a very obvious trait in common. All of them are outsiders. The story itself takes place in a town called Jefferson in Mississippi. All 4 of these characters are in this town for their own reasons, but the 4 of them do get tied up with one another as the plot moves forward. I would say the central event of the book is Joe Christmas murders a woman whose property he lived on. Miss Burden, she was part of an infamous abolitionist family, which kind of made her the town pariah. People were suspicious of her, so she was also an outsider. The plot then moves around quite a lot. We visit Joe Christmas's childhood, his teen years, his early adult years, everything that brought him to that murder and its aftermath. Joe Christmas is not a good person whatsoever, but he has also had a life of misery and suffering. And a major detail of his character is that he's biracial, and because of that, he's been dehumanized by others, by people who share both sides of his racial background. He's been deprived of that human right, an identity, a legacy, and that has taken a huge toll on him. So the question I brought up earlier about free will ties into this. Is Joe Christmas a victim of fate, of circumstances outside of his control, of nature? It's such a big and difficult question to grapple with, because while you do empathize with Christmas's story, his awful childhood, how he's always been left outside, never acknowledged as who and what he is, there's also that question of, well, didn't you have the choice in the end? When his foster mother, when Miss Burden did show kindness to him, he chose to be cruel. But then perhaps because of his brutal upbringing, he didn't really have that choice in the way that other people have had. It's such a gigantic moral conundrum that Faulkner is exploring. And there are many other facets to the story as well. He does explore the question of free will, also self-identity, community, loneliness, the way that people can manipulate those that they love, supposedly. Mostly, I would say that this is a story about that pervasive suffering that is ever present in life. And also, maybe most importantly, redemption, although not every character is redeemed. This is an incredibly affecting story, one of those that you finish and you can only respond to with a deep echoing silence, like you're sitting in a cave alone. So yes, I thought that this was a grand book. It grapples with some of the most prevalent topics and questions of humanity, and I think the handling of those topics was very successful. However, do I recommend this book? That's completely different. It is so brutal that I cannot recommend this for everyone to read. Check trigger warnings. If you're a big fan of Southern Gothic literature, then by all means, you must read Faulkner. After finishing this, I do feel I have complicated feelings towards him. I still want and need to read his 2 most famous books, As I Lay Dying and The Sound and the Fury. Let me know if you've read both or either. Which would you recommend more? The next book I finished in August was Little Lazarus by Michael Bible. I got this one in San Francisco. I asked my friend to pick out a random book for me at a bookstore, and she chose this one. After finishing it, I had so many questions, so I looked up reviews online. I could only find one. Even when you Google this book, not much information comes up. I'm really surprised by that. I feel like this is the type of book that the literary fiction sphere would love. More people need to know about this. I think many people would love it. It's a coming-of-age story that centers Eleanor and Francoise. The 2 meet as teenagers and fall in love, and then right before leaving for college, Eleanor actually disappears. Sounds like a John Green book, but no. We also have 2 tortoises. One of them might be clairvoyant. These 4 voices are the narrators of this book. And all of them, including the two tortoises, their stories will overlap and weave into one another's. Now, there were a few minor details in the plot that didn't really make sense to me. I tried to figure them out, but they were so minor and unimportant that I just chalked it up to oversight. That didn't make me dislike this book though. It almost made me enjoy it more because it felt strangely more personal. There's a lot of heart in this book, but it's also very idiosyncratic, unique and weird, but still familiar and relatable. I love that. This was unlike anything I've ever read. It was a coming of age love story, but it wasn't corny or overwrought. I especially loved the inclusion of the two tortoises and their narration. I feel like that's what made this book so special. Their voices and experiences in life were used to illustrate the human condition, what it means to live on this earth with one another. They watched as generations passed and new generations came up and then also passed as well. But at the same time, they were solid characters throughout. What I'm trying to say is they weren't just used as vehicles to illustrate the human condition. They were themselves. They were animals, tortoises. While reading this, I actually had 3 other books on the go, so I assumed that it would take me a while to finish it, but I read the entire thing in one sitting. It is quite short and it's a page turner because you do want to find out what happened to Eleanor. By the end of it though, I was tearing up over this tortoise. Yeah, I loved it. It balanced fresh tenderness with mockery. Like, this was also a ridiculous, funny book as well. Read this one. I really want to hear more opinions and reviews on it. If you have read it, let me know your thoughts. Endling by Reva. My hold finally came through this month. This was really the only nomination on the Booker long list that I was interested in reading. And I can't lie, I think it was because of the UK cover of it. I found it to be so cute. Before reading this, I knew that it was going to be about snails and set in Ukraine. It's also about the controversial bride romance industry in Ukraine, which I did not know about. Having read this, I understand why it's on the Booker long list. I feel that they love something new and experimental, but just because it's new doesn't mean it's good, at least in my books. Let me give an overview of the plot first. We have 2, 3, actually maybe 4. Actually, maybe 5 primary characters. There's Reva, who is an enthusiastic malacologist. Actually, I think that she said something about it being called gastropodologist, maybe? A scientist who studies snails. We also have 2 sisters, Nastya and Saul. The reader does spend more time with Nastya over Saul. All 3 of them are in this bride industry. Reva, just so that she can make money to continue her research with snails. Nastya is also acting as a potential bride, and Saul is her English translator. So Nastya is not actually interested in finding herself a husband. The 2 sisters are searching for their infamous activist mother who disappeared, leaving the 2 with nothing. By involving themselves in the bride industry, which their mother vehemently protested against, they're hoping that they can find her. The 4th character I refer to is Pasha. He's one of the men searching for a bride in Ukraine to bring home with him. He's actually Ukrainian himself, but grew up in Canada. He resents his parents for making him leave Ukraine as a child, as he assumes that he would have had a better life there. Okay, and then the last primary 5th character I referenced is Reva herself. Midway through this book, the story becomes very meta. I'm not going to go into specific details because I do think that could be a spoiler for this book, but also that makes this book kind of difficult to review and explain why I disliked it. I'm going to intentionally try to be vague though. The central action of the story is Reva, Nastya, and Sol. They kidnap some of the bachelors as a kind of protest in order to get Nastya and Sol's mother's attention. But also the time frame of this, it's early 2022 in Ukraine. So in retrospect, we know that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. I enjoyed the first half of this book. I was growing very fond of the 3 ladies. I found them to be eccentric, especially Reva, but endearing. I felt like I had become involved in their fates. I was rooting for them. But then when the meta aspect came in and the 4th wall was broken, first I was just confused. Then I understood what the author was doing. I just didn't understand the reasoning behind it. I'm still unsure why. She basically inserts her story into the narrative that's already been established, and I felt that it usurped the rest of the book. This metafictional aspect is not something completely new. However, I haven't read many books where the writer inserts themselves so overtly. I don't have a problem with this kind of experimentation in a fiction book. However, I just didn't understand the reasoning for it. I'm interested in Reva's story. I'm also interested in Reva's story, Saul's story, Nastya's story, Pasha's story, even Lefty the snails. his story. I felt that when the author added the meta aspect on top, it watered down everything, everyone's story. Everyone's story dimmed, including Maria Reva's story, and then I just lost interest. However, I have had a cursory look at other reviews for this book, and I'm pretty sure I am the only negative one that I've seen thus far. So please consider that when deciding whether or not you want to read this book. It may very well resonate with you. You could love it. I don't think my opinion is or will be the truth of this book for everyone. If you've also read Endling, I would love to hear your opinion of it. I think this is one that could garner great discussion. So if you're looking for a book club pick, this could be an option for you. And those were all the books I read in September. I am fully into fall reading right now. I have a lot of books that I want to read. It's a shame I only have one brain to read with. For me, it's never about the number of books I read. I don't care about the number. However, there are so many books I want to read, so I feel this private pressure with myself to experience them while I'm still alive. I could read continuously for the rest of my life and live until 100 and still miss so many amazing books. I can't reconcile with that thought yet, so in the meantime, I'm just reading. Anyways, I did want to mention the books that I'm currently reading and the ones that I picked out for my September TBR. I never stringently follow my TBRs. I just think that they're fun to curate and share, and I think it could be helpful for others looking for a book to read. So the book I really want to get to is We Love You, Bunny. This is coming out towards the end of September, so this is the ARC version. The title is not actually Are You Ready, Bunny? I've had this ARC for quite a while, and I've been saving it for fall reading. A lot of people have already read the ARC, and I have been hearing some interesting opinions so far, but I'm staying positive. I enjoyed Bunny for what it is. I did not think that it was an amazing piece of literature. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. So I'm gonna try to enjoy this simply for what it is. I also finally want to get to Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. I've never seen the movie for this. I know that it's considered iconic. It's very famous and beloved. This does sound like more of a summer read, but you know, I did see that the temperature is going to reach almost 90 this weekend, so maybe I'll start this soon. I also have The Fate of Mary Rose by Caroline Blackwood. I thought that this might have been her last fiction novel I have yet to read, because I do have a collection of her short stories behind me that I also want to read at some point. However, I looked it up and there are two more. The Stepdaughter, which I have, and one other one. But the other one I think is quite difficult to find in print anymore, so we'll see. I'll have to track that down. Just like Caroline Blackwood's other books I've read, I'm expecting this to be unsettling and a bit macabre. Obviously, Shirley Jackson, these are my last two fiction novels by her I have yet to read. We have The Road Through the Wall and also The Sundial. I wanted to ask you guys which one I should read in September. Probably the other one I'll read in October. I'm kind of leaning towards The Road Through the Wall, but let me know, Shirley Jackson enthusiasts, I know you guys are out there. Which one should I go for first? Lastly, I like reading books that have titles of the month. So for example, I read The Enchanted April in April last year or maybe 2 years ago. And then I read Light in August by William Faulkner in August. And now I'm going to read The Last September by Elizabeth Bowen. Elizabeth Bowen is not a spooky, eerie writer. She writes more cozy books, I guess. I have only read one other by her, The Death of the Heart. Look at this gorgeous cover. I didn't actually read from this edition though. I read this a while ago and I found this recently. The edition I did read from has an amazing cover of a girl, a painting of a girl on it though, which I recommend. I've also been saving The Dean's December by Saul Bellow for December, so I feel like I need an October and November book as well. As for the books I'm currently reading right now, I did finish The Dose Effect yesterday. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was groundbreaking. I do think that some people would find this helpful and interesting. For me personally, I didn't, but I did take some tidbits away, so I'm going to be returning this to the library soon. I'm still slowly reading Granta's Winners. I try to read an essay or a short story once every 2 days. I'm also very slowly going through my copy of History by Elsa Morante. I'm now in the year 1944. I just started it. Enjoying this, but this is definitely a slow read. I just feel that this is the type of book you have to slowly take in. I'm also currently reading Catalan Street by Magda Szabo. I'm only about 70 pages in. This is a very short book. I've been reading it for about a week now because I can only read a chapter a day. Guys, I think this is the best book I have read all year, and I think it's going to be the best book of the year. This book is one of the reasons why I read. This is, to me, perfect. Whenever I finish a chapter, I have to put this down and stop reading because it's like too much. I have to marinate in her perfect writing. If you know about my book taste, you know that I love Magda Szabo, Abigail, The Door. Those are two of my favorite books. This one, 70 pages in, I'm predicting will be my favorite of all of the books I've read by her. Yeah, I think this is going to be like a lifetime favorite for me. I also randomly put a hold on Sky Daddy by Kate Folk a while ago, like maybe 2 months ago. I can't remember why I put a hold on it. I feel like I saw like a rave review, but honestly, I think I'm gonna return this to the library. This is just not speaking to me right now for fall. If my hold had come in sooner in the summer, I would have definitely read it, but for right now, I'm not interested, so I'm gonna return it. Maybe in the future, I'll pick it up again. And I think that's all I have to share with you guys right now. Thank you for watching as always, and I hope you guys all have a successful reading month in September.